Hi, David again. Still in October and still beginning of the month, second week of the month, I forget, 5th, 6th, something like that. I wanted to I wanted to make this a little lighter. This is a tape about me at BYU. Now, BYU has asked for their bachelor's degree back many times. They don't like that I turn it and face it into the wall so nobody can read it. I told them I'd be happy to give my degree back if they'd give me my money back. Now, you know, the Mormon church is not Walmart. They don't give you your money back. It's like the Philippines. If you buy it, if it's broken or doesn't work, it's your product. You don't have any recourse. Be that as it may, in 1966, I graduated from Nordhoff High School in Ojai, California. And much to the dismay of my counselor, I decided to go to Brigham Young University. And because I was a Mormon, they accepted me. And my grade point average was not very good, something like, I don't know, 2.89, just B- kind of thing. And I was a freshman. I lived in Chipman Hall and lived on campus, and I was a good boy. I was still a virgin. I don't know if my fingers were, but I was never asked that by a stake president or a bishop. They just asked if I was morally clean, and I said yes. I never said talk to the hands. But anyway, I didn't have a car. All the time I was a teenager, I had a car until I went to BYU. And it's kind of hard to date girls at BYU. If you don't have a car. I mean, girls are kind of into not walking in the snow and in blizzard, whiteout conditions. Their prom dress and their pride doesn't make that an attractive alternative. So I took some extra money, not very much, because I wasn't a rich student at all. Middle class. I was the first college graduate in our entire genealogy. So anyway, I bought a nice a 56 Chevy. Wasn't fancy, 4 doors, but original two-tone paint. And I got a date with this girl, and we went to the, I forget what it was, big dance, homecoming or something. And I was driving her home, and the snow had packed the signs in the parking lot, and I wasn't that familiar with BYU and its parking regulations. So she told me where she lived, and I drove up by her dorm. And she was getting out of the car in a blizzard, and the police, the BYU security, the Nazi police department of BYU, shows up and says to me, "What are you doing in this restricted area?" And I said, "Well, I didn't know it was restricted." And he says, "Well, it says right there on the sign." And I looked at the sign, nothing but snow. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I said, "Do you have x-ray vision?" And he goes, "No. Do you have any tickets?" And I said, "No." He says, "You got one now." So he took the time, whatever, 15, 20 minutes, and wrote me a ticket for illegally parking there. Well, I went to see the judge. I wanted to talk to the judge and say, "Hey, I have some mitigating circumstances here. The sign is packed with snow." Well, this is like Vietnam in the 60s. Going to see a judge at BYU. So I tried to get into the court system, and they said, "Well, you have to pay your $55 fine first." I said, "Well, that's assuming that I'm guilty." And they go, "Well, we assume you're guilty. It's like a court of love. You're assumed guilty until you prove your innocence." And so I said, "Well, that's not right." And I refused to pay the ticket. The next night, I went to bed and everything was normal, and I woke up in the morning and I went down to get in my car to drive it to class. And the hood is up on my car. Well, I know I didn't leave the hood up on my car, and I was curious why the hood was up, so I wandered over to it. And I look under the hood, and the carburetor and the manifold are gone. I'm not much of a mechanic, but to get a carburetor and a manifold off, I think you're looking at 20 to 30 minutes to get that off. Well, that was an area that BYU security was supposed to be patrolling. But they were patrolling the girls' dorm rather than my property. So that made me pretty angry. And I got it fixed. And of course, I was a kid of the 60s. And so I wrote on both sides of my car and the hood and the trunk, BYU security, go to hell. Well, I was a young Mormon. I didn't realize you could be castrated for that. And that's just before they interview you. I drove it up on campus in the busy intersection up there by the Marriott Center. And I couldn't believe how many people were cheering and had the victory sign and honking horns. I thought I was popular. Well, I drove home. I parked it. And I wasn't in the dorm 10 minutes. And I get this knock. And I say, "What is wanted?" If you've been to the temple, that's funny. And so I open the door, and here's two security guys. And they go, "Is that your car down there in the parking lot?" I said, "Yes, sir, it is. And I'm not hiding anything." So they weren't either. They said, "Come with us." So they captured me. They didn't handcuff me, but they took me to Standards. That's like if you're a Mormon and you're watching this, look up Committee to Strengthen the Members. It's the CIA, FBI, secret society like the Danites to catch you doing things. So I went to Standards, and I went into this man's office, and he said, "We think, you know, you have a little bit of an emotional problem." And I said, "Well, my parents thought so the whole time I was in their family." He said, "Well, we want you to take a test." And I said, "Well, I don't like taking tests, and I don't want you probing into my personality." He said, "Well, you have two choices. You can take a test, or you can go home." I didn't have to think very long, because I was a freshman. And I said, "I think I'll stay. Get me the test." So I found out later, it's an MMPI test. And back in the old days, it was different than it is today. But there's like 500 questions on it. And it had questions like, how often do you want to have intercourse with your mother? Well, I love my mother, but if you've seen her, you wouldn't think that that would be a legitimate, bona fide question. And it had all kinds of, do you see spirits? And I said, you know, I'm not the prophet. No, I didn't say that. Had 500 questions, and it was multiple choice. And one of the choices was, does not apply. Well, being bipolar, I didn't know I was in those days. I just put on this expensive test. I think it's $200 or $300 to take it and $150 to grade it. I put does not apply 500 times. I handed it in, and he said, "All right, come back in 3 days, and we'll have it graded, and then you and I can talk." And okay. So 3 days later, I come walking in, and he didn't look like a happy camper. It looked like a stone with a face on it sitting at this table in this big fancy office that your tithing money pays for. And I sat down, and he said, "Well, I'm not happy with this." I said, "Oh, really?" Because I'm just trying to be cool here. He says, "No. You answered does not apply 500 times. Do you know that?" I said, "No, I didn't know that." I didn't know that. Did I? So he's stupid, and I'm just being a smart ass. So he says to me, "Well, you have two choices." Well, now, it's when Mormons give you choices, it's cut your testicles off or do what we want. There's the two choices of the Mormon church. So here's my two choices again. He said, "I understand you're not happy with our legal system here." And I said, "You understand right." He says, "Then you will do a thesis-type paper with bibliography and quotations and page numbers, everything, on how we should fix the court system." I said, "Okay, is that the bad news?" He says, "No, that's the good news." "Okay, what's the bad news?" He says, "You can go home." I go, "Jeez, I've made this choice before." So I said, "All right, I'll write it." Well, I did, and I don't know if I had any influence. I have no idea, but I do know today at BYU, you can see the judge before you pay the fine. You're presumed innocent until you are proven guilty by the judge, and then you pay your fine, just like in regular society, not Mormon cult society. So anyway, that's the end of my BYU story. Let me tell you one more that, jeez. I was living in Newberry Park, California, and I owned a couple of daycare centers with my wife, and we bought a house. a very nice house in a residential area there in Newberry Park. And I bought it from two attorneys who happened to have their children in daycare with us. And I thought, gee, if you buy a house from attorneys, I'm not going to run it slipped my mind. The report, whether the title is encumbered or not. It's not a housing report. It'll come to me. But anyway, I thought that the house was free and clear, and there weren't any liens on it. And I thought the attorneys, of course, would have done a search, a title search to make sure it was clean. Well, we lived in it for a year or so. I went to sell it. I got a bona fide offer, and they did a research to make sure the title was clear. And it wasn't. It wasn't. There was a $40,000 lien on my house. And the attorneys didn't put it there. They bought it from my elders' quorum president, the one that hammered us every Sunday. You got to go to the temple. Make sure you pay your tithing. The Lord is going to get you and your family. Don't even think evil. Wear your garments up around your head so that nothing can happen to you. Bill Penberthy. That's his name. Truth is a defense for liable. Bill, sue me. Go get an attorney and sue me and prove this story isn't true. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I'm going to apologize. Bill Penberthy was another Elders Quorum president that did outrageous things, and I'll put that on the tape. The other young man, oh God, I apologize. I did not mean to besmirch Bill Penberthy on this tape. I'll do that on another tape. But anyway, his name escapes me. And I called him and said, you know, you need to pay that lien. And he said, no, I don't have to be honest in my business dealings. I'm just the Elders Quorum president. So I went and got an appointment with the state president. And in those days, I could get what's called a TRW, which is a credit report. His was 14 pages long. Bankruptcies, collections, write-offs. Unbelievable. He was a construction person, owned his own company. A long story short, I go into the president's office and I say, President, you know, you got an Elders Quorum president and I want you to show, or I came in to show you his credit report. State president, kind of a cursory look, because you don't have to look at this very long to realize what kind of a person this is. And he says, well, this isn't a church, a business. This has nothing to do with the church. I said, well, I think it does. He is chosen by you. His Elders Quorum president, that is a stake decision. Who is an Elders Quorum president? That wasn't anyone else. That was you and the High Council that approved that name. And you have a criminal crook. He said, what do you mean? I said, I'm trying to sell my house and he's got a $40,000 lien on it and he won't remove it. I think that you ought to call him in and say he's not being honest in his business dealings and you want to take his recommend. Well, I'm not going to do that. I said, okay. What are you going to do? Nothing. This is not church business. So I got up and left. And I went home. And I guess it's just my personality. A kid of the 60s, we demonstrated a lot. I never did, because I was a good Mormon boy until I got to BYU. And so I had in those days a white Camaro, brand new, Z28, that had gold racing stripes on it and gold rims. And I put on the side, the two doors, and the front, and the trunk, State President, Newberry Park, endorses criminal activity. Big red watercolor. So I took it up. He had a beautiful, beautiful house, as they always do. You know, the rich prosper. And they think that's because they're spiritual. They link those two things together. They're not linked together. But I parked my car right on the curb in front of his house in the public street. No one can move that car for 72 hours. And I went home. I wasn't home 10 minutes. And I get this knock, knock, knock. And again, I go back to the temple. What is wanted? David, been true and faithful, will you open the door? And I said, I will, through the veil. So I opened the door, and this guy I really liked. He was from Hawaii, and he was in the High Priest Quorum. He says, can I come in? And I said, yeah. Comes in, he sits down, and he says, David, he said, I want to talk to you about a car wash. I said, okay, what's your proposal? And he said, well, we have thought about it, and we have contacted where this young president moved to Utah. He's hiding from his debt, he's hiding from the church, but we tracked him down. See, there's your committee for strengthening the members. It's the committee to excommunicate you. They say the opposite. They always double talk the opposite. So, well, we found him in Utah, and we talked to his bishop, and he's sending the $40,000 to remove the lien. Would you mind moving the car and washing it? I said, no, not at all. I'm not an unreasonable guy. And so I went over, picked the car up, and I washed it. Sure enough, the check showed up, and we got the lien off of my property, and I was able to sell it. If you get into business with Mormons, don't take checks. Don't believe that because they're wearing a tie and a suit and they're smiling like the Chinese do, that doesn't mean anything. They will lie, they will cheat, they will inflate interest rates. They'll inflate interest rates, and the contract you sign, suddenly there's redacted pieces of it, and suddenly the deal that you made is not the deal that you get. I've seen a lot of this. I have avoided a lot of it. I've bought houses with Mormons, and you know, they're going into foreclosure, and this is a good deal. And then I found cracked foundations where the water comes through the basement, and I'm just being a voice of warning, and I hope you enjoyed my two stories there about some of my experiences. But be so careful. If they say, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ, or they say, I worship Joseph Smith, or they say, pay, lay, ale, grab your wallet and hold on and run as fast away from that person as you can. I have learned that Mormons are desperate. They pay too much tithing, they have too many kids, and they don't have enough money to pay the bills. Desperate people do desperate things. Poor people have poor ways. So, you can listen to what they say, but look at what they do, and how they interact with each other, and how they interact with the Gentiles that were not members, the non-members, or the apostates, or the great and abominable church, which is the Catholic Church. Now they're playing that down. They don't mean to say that, and they've changed the temple endowment session that the preacher is not paying. You know, there's been change after change after change because of the silliness that goes on there. But let me be a clear voice. When you do business with them, if you do, hold on to your wallet. When you find out that they're a Mormon, they're desperate, and they will do desperate things, and you, perhaps like me, will get hurt. Thank you very much.